Imagine a Bible unlike the one you know, one that holds secrets so profound they were locked away and hidden from the world for centuries. This isn't the Bible with 66 books widely recognized in most Christian traditions. No, this is the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, containing an astonishing 88 books. Among them are texts considered so mysterious and controversial that they were deliberately excluded from the canon by early church leaders. But why? What was in these texts that made them seem like such a significant threat? Now think about this. What if these books contain stories that unravel the origins of fallen angels, the secrets of the Nephilim, those enigmatic giant figures mentioned in Scripture, and descriptions of the end times that go far beyond anything you've ever heard? What if they unveiled hidden details about a cosmic battle between good and evil and presented a celestial framework explaining the role of angels and demons throughout human history? Imagine the impact of discovering that entire chapters of spiritual history were intentionally left out for being deemed too dangerous or incompatible with the official narrative. Today, we'll embark on a unique journey to uncover the secrets of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, which has preserved books completely removed from the Western canon. Books like Enoch, which vividly describes the rebellion of angels against God and the origins of hybrid beings between humans and angels, or Jubilees, which offers a spiritual timeline of the world and redefines our understanding of angels' roles in history. These texts are not just historical artifacts, they carry messages and mysteries that challenge how we view Christianity today. But what exactly led to these texts being excluded? Was it a matter of doctrine, power, or could it be that these texts contained revelations so profound they threatened the theological framework the early church was trying to establish? This is where our journey becomes even more intriguing, as the reasons behind this exclusion go far beyond simple theological decisions. They involve political disputes, cultural tensions, and even colonial efforts aimed at suppressing the spiritual independence of nations like Ethiopia. And it doesn't stop there. As we dive deeper into these questions, you'll see how the exclusion of these books shaped not just the history of Christianity, but also the way we understand the Bible today. Ethiopia, with its rich spiritual heritage and one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, preserved texts that the rest of the Christian world rejected. But why? And more importantly, what can we learn from these texts that were deemed too dangerous and forbidden? What can they teach us about our faith, about God, and about ourselves? Stay with me until the end of this video because what you're about to discover goes far beyond what meets the eye. Astonishing revelations await not just about the content of these books, but also about the forces that worked to keep them hidden. Perhaps now is the time to question what we know and to allow these secrets to finally come to light. Are you ready to face the truth that's been concealed for so long? Because once revealed, it may forever change how you see the Bible and your own faith. Before we delve into the reasons behind the exclusion of these texts and the stories they hold, we need to understand Ethiopia's unique context and its connection to Scripture. Unlike much of the Christian world as we know it today, Ethiopia has a deeply rooted spiritual history that predates even the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire. While many nations were just beginning to encounter the Christian faith, Ethiopia had already adopted it as its official religion by the mid-4th century, with the Kingdom of Aksum becoming one of the world's first Christian states. This connection to Christianity wasn't just early. It was remarkably resilient. The Ethiopian Bible, written in the ancient Ge'ez language, became a central pillar of the country's religious and cultural life. But to truly grasp Ethiopia's uniqueness on the global spiritual stage, we need to go even further back in time to an episode mentioned in both the Western Bible and Ethiopian tradition, the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon. According to Scripture, the Queen of Sheba traveled from a distant land to meet the wise King Solomon, seeking answers to her riddles. This brief mention in the Western Bible transforms into a much richer narrative within Ethiopian tradition, particularly in the Kebra Nagast, a sacred text central to Ethiopia's national and spiritual identity. According to this tradition, the Queen of King Solomon had a son, Menelik I, who later became the first emperor of Ethiopia. But the story doesn't end there. When Menelik visited his father Solomon in Jerusalem, he is said to have brought back the most sacred object in all of biblical history, the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, the same Ark of the Covenant that held the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments and represented the divine presence on earth. According to Ethiopian tradition, this ark was taken to Axum, where it remains to this day, safeguarded in secrecy within a church under constant watch. For Ethiopians, this is not just history, it is a testament to their divine mission, that God chose Ethiopia as the guardian of his covenant. This narrative places Ethiopia not as a peripheral nation in the divine plan, but as a spiritual center chosen to preserve the deepest mysteries of faith. This context helps us understand why Ethiopia retained books that the rest of the Christian world rejected. While Western church councils debated which books should be considered inspired, Ethiopia, isolated from these decisions, preserved a wide range of texts rooted in ancient Jewish and Christian traditions. The result was a Bible with 88 books, including texts deemed dangerous, mystical, or simply incompatible with the direction the Western church sought to take. But why were these books excluded in the first place? To answer this question, we must delve into the political and religious climate of the time. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, early church leaders gathered to define the core doctrines of Christianity and eventually decide which texts would be included in the biblical canon. Many of the books now in the Bible were chosen for their consistency with the Christ-centered narrative of salvation. However, other texts, such as the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, were considered dangerous because they contained detailed descriptions of angels, apocalyptic visions, and practices deeply tied to Jewish traditions. For the Western Church, which sought to distance itself from Judaism and solidify a distinct Christian identity, these texts were seen as problematic. They explored themes considered speculative, such as angelic hierarchies, the fall of angels, and cosmic secrets, while reinforcing Jewish practices like the Sabbath and dietary laws at a time when the church was opening its doors to Gentiles. In Ethiopia, however, these texts were never seen as a threat. On the contrary, they were cherished as essential pieces for understanding God's cosmic plan and the relationship between the divine and the human. Moreover, Ethiopia's geographical and political isolation allowed it to preserve these texts without interference from the decisions made at Western church councils. While the Christian world in the West debated and adjusted its theology over the centuries, Ethiopia maintained an uninterrupted connection to these ancient traditions. As a result, books banned elsewhere continued to be read, studied, and revered as integral parts of the Ethiopian Bible. As we continue this journey, we'll begin to uncover the secrets contained within these books. But before diving into their contents, it's worth reflecting. Were these texts banned purely for theological reasons? Or is there something within these writings, something so profound and transformative, that it could reshape how we see our faith, the world, and God's role in our lives? The story of the exclusion of biblical books is not just about spirituality. It is deeply political. As Christianity began to spread across the Roman Empire, establishing a uniform doctrine became essential to unite an ever-growing number of believers under one set of beliefs. The church needed stability, which meant eliminating texts that could encourage divergent interpretations. The books deemed mystical or too closely tied to Jewish traditions were among the first to be discarded. But what was it about these texts that made them so unsettling? Take the Book of Enoch, for example. It goes far beyond the traditional narrative we know. It delves deeply into events preceding even the Great Flood, describing fallen angels who came to earth, rebelled against God, and united with humans to produce the Nephilim, a race of powerful and corrupt giants. These angels not only disobeyed God's commands, so brought forbidden knowledge to humanity, such as the use of weapons, occult practices, and mastery over natural forces. These secrets, considered dangerous for corrupting God's natural order, are said to have led the world into such profound moral decay that only the flood could cleanse it. For the early church leaders, these accounts were not just uncomfortable. They challenged the central narrative of Christ's redemption. How could the simplicity of the gospel be reconciled with such complex descriptions of cosmic battles and angelic hierarchies? Many of these texts presented intricate details that could confuse believers, diverting focus from what was considered the essence of the Christian message: salvation through faith in Jesus. Thus, they were set aside, labeled as apocryphal or heretical, and gradually faded from the Western canon. Meanwhile, as these texts were banned and forgotten in the West, Ethiopia charted a different course. In Ethiopian tradition, the Book of Enoch was not merely another account. It was a key to understanding the mysteries of the spiritual realm and the challenges humanity faced. Its pages detailed not only the fall of the angels, but also Enoch's apocalyptic visions, where the ultimate fate of the righteous and the wicked is revealed. For Ethiopian Christians, these writings were not threats to doctrine, but essential pieces to grasp the full scope of God's plan. Beyond the Book of Enoch, other texts like the Book of Jubilees deepened the connection between human history and divine purpose. This book retells biblical history with a special focus on angelic intervention in critical moments. From creation to the days of Moses, if Jubilees describes how angels guided humanity, instructing them in God's laws and the importance of living in harmony with the divine plan. However, its emphasis on observing Jewish laws, such as the Sabbath and dietary practices, made it unpopular among early Christians seeking to distance themselves from Judaism to attract Gentile converts. This tension between tradition and innovation was one of the driving forces shaping Christianity as we know it today. The exclusion of these texts was not merely an act of selection, but a strategic move to consolidate power and establish a universal Christianity. Books that reinforced ties to Judaism or explored profound spiritual mysteries were eliminated to create a more accessible and uniform narrative. Meanwhile, Ethiopia remained isolated from these disputes, preserving not only the rejected texts, but also a vision of Christianity that embraced both its Jewish heritage and mystical elements. This preservation was not merely about tradition, it was an act of resistance. In a world increasingly dominated by Western influence, Ethiopia held steadfast to its spiritual identity, refusing to abandon the truths it believed were entrusted to it. The existence of texts like Enoch and Jubilees in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible raises profound questions. They are not merely fragments of ancient history. They are windows into a spiritual world that, in many ways, has been lost to the rest of Christianity. If these texts hold truths that were hidden, what does that say about the way faith has been shaped over the centuries? More importantly, what can we rediscover by delving into these stories, kept alive by one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world? As we explore the secrets of these books, we begin to realize that their exclusion was not solely a theological decision, but a reflection of something much larger. While these texts remain preserved in Ethiopia, they continue to challenge the dominant narrative, whispering ancient truths that await rediscovery. To understand the true significance of these texts' preservation in Ethiopia, we must look beyond theology and explore the rich historical tapestry connecting this nation to its biblical roots. Ethiopia's relationship with the Bible predates Christianity, reaching back to ancient times. According to Ethiopian tradition, this connection began with the legendary Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon in Jerusalem nearly 3,000 years ago. While this encounter is briefly mentioned in the Western Bible, it holds far greater significance in Ethiopian tradition. According to the Ethiopian text, Kebra Nagast, the Queen of Sheba, known in Ethiopia as Makeda, not only visited Solomon, but also had a son with him named Menelik I. This son, tradition says, not only founded Ethiopia's imperial lineage, but also brought the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred artifact containing the Ten Commandments, from Jerusalem to Ethiopia. For Ethiopians, the Ark of the Covenant is not a lost symbol of biblical history. It is a living reality, safeguarded to this day in the city of Axum by priests who devote their lives to protecting it. This direct connection to the Ark is not seen as mere coincidence. For Ethiopians, it is a sign that their land was chosen by God to be a guardian of the faith, a nation entrusted with preserving the deepest truths of Scripture. The belief that the Ark resides in Axum is not just a cultural aspect. It forms the foundation of a spiritual identity that transcends generations. It's no wonder that with such a profound legacy, Ethiopia adopted Christianity so early, officially declaring it the state religion in the 4th century, becoming one of the first nations in the world to do so. But Ethiopian spirituality goes beyond the preservation of artifacts or the early adoption of Christianity. It is intrinsically linked to what many see as a divine purpose, to keep alive the truths that others have rejected. For centuries, while the Western world consolidated its biblical canon around 66 books, Ethiopia preserved texts such as the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and the Maccabees as part of its Bible and as an integral element of its spiritual identity. These texts, deemed apocryphal or even dangerous in the West, were considered essential in Ethiopia, offering profound insights into the interplay between the divine and the human, the celestial and the earthly. The preservation of these texts also reveals a deep Ethiopian perspective on time and history. Unlike the West, which often saw the exclusion of certain books as progress toward a purer faith, Ethiopia viewed inclusion as an act of fidelity to divine truth. Each preserved book was not just a historical record, but a key to understanding God's eternal purpose. Texts such as the Book of Jubilees, detailing divine timelines and the interactions of angels with patriarchs, were not seen as supplementary, but as fundamental to comprehending the entirety of the biblical narrative. What makes this even more fascinating is Ethiopia's spiritual independence maintained over centuries. While the Western world underwent theological divisions, schisms, and endless debates over what should or should not be included in the Bible, Ethiopia remained largely isolated from these disputes. This isolation allowed Ethiopia to preserve a tradition that dates back to the earliest days of Christianity, and, in many ways, even beyond. This independence did not come without challenges. During the colonial period, as European powers sought to dominate Africa, Ethiopia became a symbol of both political and spiritual resistance. Efforts to subjugate Ethiopia included attempts to undermine its faith and discredit its Bible. Yet, the Ethiopian people stood firm, viewing their Bible not just as a sacred text, but as a living testimony of their connection to God. Reflecting on Ethiopia's history inevitably raises a profound question. What do these texts contain that made them so indispensable to Ethiopians, yet so contentious for the rest of the Christian world? If they were considered dangerous in the West, could they also be revelatory of something not yet fully understood? These stories, spanning millennia, carry a spiritual weight that transcends borders and challenges conventional narratives. The texts preserved by Ethiopian tradition not only challenge conventional definitions of Christian faith, but also reveal truths long kept on the margins. Among these texts, the Book of Enoch stands out as perhaps the most enigmatic and controversial. Widely read by early Christians and even quoted in some New Testament epistles, it was excluded from the Western canon due to its detailed and, for many, uncomfortable descriptions of the heavenly realm, angelic rebellion, and the consequences of this cosmic rupture. In the Book of Enoch, we are introduced to the Watchers, angels sent by God to observe humanity who became consumed by their own desires. These angels, led by Semjaza, broke the boundaries between the celestial and the earthly by taking human wives and producing hybrid offspring called the Nephilim, giants described as corrupt and destructive who brought chaos to the earth. But the impact of these fallen angels went beyond procreation. According to Enoch, they also imparted forbidden knowledge to humanity: occult arts, astrology, the use of metals for weapons and adornments, and even magical practices. These teachings, though fascinating, were viewed by early Christians as a corruption of divine order. The Book of Enoch portrays a world on the brink of collapse, where the purity of creation was compromised by the influx of forbidden knowledge. In response to this imbalance, God intervened. Through the archangels Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, the Watchers were captured and condemned, while the Nephilim were destroyed by the Great Flood. Yet, according to Enoch, the impact of this rebellion lingers even today, as the spirits of these beings continue to roam the earth, subtly and dangerously influencing humanity. But why was this account considered so dangerous? Part of the reason lies in how the Book of Enoch not only offers an alternative explanation for the origin of evil, distinct from the Genesis narrative, but also delves deeply into a worldview where the physical and spiritual are constantly intertwined. For early church leaders striving for a unified and comprehensible faith, these intricate details risked opening doors to divergent and potentially heretical interpretations. In Ethiopia, however, this text was never marginalized. On the contrary, it was preserved as an essential piece of divine revelation, a reminder that the conflict between good and evil is not just historical, but eternal. It provides a lens through which Ethiopians understand the complexities of the cosmos, where angels, demons, and humans play significant roles in fulfilling God's plan. Another equally profound text is the Book of Jubilees, often referred to as the Little Genesis. This book offers a detailed chronology from creation to the giving of the law at Mount Sinai, with a strong emphasis on the ongoing interaction between God, angels, and humanity. It also introduces the concept of a solar calendar, diverging from the lunar calendar commonly used in much of Jewish and Christian tradition. The calendar in Jubilees, with its precise 364-day cycles, reflects what the text claims to be the original divine order. It argues that using an incorrect calendar caused humanity to lose alignment with sacred times and consequently with God's will. This idea resonates deeply in Ethiopian practice, where the solar calendar is still observed, symbolizing fidelity to what is seen as the Creator's eternal design. But Jubilees goes beyond chronologies and calendars. It describes the constant involvement of angels in the lives of the patriarchs from Adam to Abraham, guiding them in observing God's law, proper worship, and preserving the covenant. For Ethiopian tradition, this text is not merely historical, but instructional, emphasizing that the relationship between God and humanity is mediated by celestial messengers, and urging a life lived in obedience to divine order. These books, with their mystical depth and theological implications, not only offer a glimpse into an older spirituality, but also challenge modern believers to reconsider what was lost when these texts were excluded from the Western canon. They provoke fundamental questions. How fully do we understand what it means to be in communion with God? What have we abandoned by narrowing our comprehension of the Bible to what was deemed acceptable by councils held centuries ago? Ethiopia's preservation of these texts reminds us that faith has layers, many of which remain hidden, waiting to be rediscovered by those willing to delve into the depths of divine mystery. As we delve further into Ethiopia's history and its connection to sacred texts, one historical and spiritual figure emerges, blending mystery and reverence: the Queen of Sheba. This powerful ruler, mentioned briefly in the Western Bible, gains a richer, more detailed dimension in Ethiopian tradition. According to the Ethiopian sacred text, Kebra Nagast, literally the glory of the kings, the Queen of Sheba, known in Ethiopia as Makeda, undertook an extraordinary journey to Jerusalem to meet the wise King Solomon. This visit was not merely a diplomatic encounter, but a moment of profound spiritual connection. The Ethiopian narrative reveals that from this union was born Menelik Thes, who would later become the first emperor of Ethiopia. But the most remarkable part of the story is what Menelik brought back to his kingdom, none other than the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred artifact that housed the stone tablets of the law given to Moses on Mount Sinai. For Ethiopians, this is not just a historical event, it is a divine milestone, positioning them at the center of God's plan. It is believed that the Ark, safeguarded ever since in the Church of St. Mary of Zion in the city of Aksum, is protected by dedicated monks known as the guardians of the Ark. These monks devote their lives to preserving this sacred object, and very few people in the world have ever had access to it. Shrouded in mystery and reverence, the Ark's presence in Ethiopia symbolizes the nation's divine selection as the protector of God's covenant with humanity. But Ethiopia's connection to the divine goes beyond the Ark of the Covenant. Its religious history is marked by a spiritual continuity that dates back to the earliest days of Christianity. In the 4th century AD, the Kingdom of Aksum became one of the first nations in the world to officially adopt Christianity as a state religion, long before many European powers. This milestone solidified Ethiopia's spiritual identity, allowing it to preserve traditions and texts that, in other parts of the world, were either forgotten or deliberately erased. The spread of Christianity in Ethiopia was not the result of European colonizers, but stemmed from an internal movement sparked by the Apostle Philip and the baptism of the Ethiopian eunuch, as recorded in the Book of Acts. This seemingly simple encounter had profound repercussions, as the eunuch brought the message of the gospel back to his homeland, laying the foundation for one of the world's oldest and most resilient Christian traditions. Moreover, the apocryphal texts preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church offer a spiritual richness that challenges conventional thinking. For instance, the Ascension of Isaiah is a text that narrates the prophet Isaiah's celestial journey through 7 heavens, where he witnesses the glory of God, the hierarchy of angels, and the eternal conflict between good and evil. This text, also excluded from the Western canon, provides a cosmic vision that emphasizes the intrinsic connection between the heavenly realm and human destiny. The Ascension of Isaiah vividly describes the descent of the Messiah from the 7th heaven to earth, where he would take human form, face opposition from Satan, and ultimately triumph over the forces of evil. This narrative not only foreshadows the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, but also illuminates Christ's role as the mediator between the celestial and the earthly. For Ethiopians, these revelations are not merely fascinating, they are central to understanding God's plan of salvation. Another remarkable text is the Book of Baruch, which offers a profound reflection on sin, repentance, and restoration. Written during the Babylonian exile, it captures Israel's lament while also conveying a message of hope that God is always willing to restore those who turn back to him. Accompanying Baruch is the letter of Jeremiah, which warns against idolatry, highlighting the futility of false gods and the supremacy of the one true God. These texts are not only historically resonant, but also speak powerfully to the modern human condition, reminding us of the importance of remaining faithful to God, even in times of adversity. The preservation of these texts in Ethiopia was no accident. It reflects an unshakable commitment to deep spirituality and a holistic understanding of sacred history. While other Christian traditions opted for a more restricted canon, Ethiopia embraced the full scope of divine revelation, recognizing that each text, each story, and each vision contributes an indispensable piece to the divine puzzle. These scriptures continue to nourish the faith and identity of a people who see their history as an integral part of God's eternal plan. Understanding the deeper significance behind the sacred texts preserved in Ethiopia also requires an analysis of the historical and cultural factors that shaped this unique tradition. The preservation of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible with its 88 books was not merely an act of religious devotion, but also a form of spiritual resistance against forces seeking to eliminate or reshape ancient Christian traditions. To fully grasp this, we must look back to the Council of Nicaea, held in 325 AD, an event that marked the consolidation of the biblical canon in the West. At the Council of Nicaea, led by Roman Emperor Constantine, Christian leaders convened to resolve theological disputes and establish a unified doctrine. In the process, numerous texts that had previously been widely used by Christian and Jewish communities were deemed non-canonical. Texts like the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the books of Maccabees were set aside, often because they were seen as overly tied to Jewish traditions, or because they explored mystical and apocalyptic themes that did not align with the central focus on the gospel of Christ. For the Ethiopian church, however, these texts never lost their significance. They were preserved and celebrated as integral parts of the divine narrative, offering a broader perspective on God's relationship with humanity. Take, for example, the Book of Enoch, a fascinating work that delves deeply into the realm of angels, watchers, and the Nephilim. This text describes how fallen angels descended to earth, taught forbidden knowledge to humanity, such as astrology, magic, and weapon forging, and fathered the Nephilim, gigantic beings who wrought destruction and corruption. Including this text in the Ethiopian Bible provides a glimpse into the events leading to the flood, enriching the understanding of the spiritual battle between good and evil. Similarly, the Book of Jubilees, sometimes called the Little Genesis, offers a retelling of the events of Genesis and Exodus, emphasizing divine chronology and adherence to God's laws. It introduces a solar calendar of 364 days, distinct from the lunar calendar later adopted by Rabbinic Judaism, suggesting that true worship requires alignment with the cosmic cycles established by God. For Ethiopians, following this calendar was, and remains, a way to honor creation and stay in harmony with divine timing. Meanwhile, the books of Maccabees provide narratives of heroic resistance, unwavering faith, and divine intervention in moments of oppression. Stories like the revolt led by Judas Maccabeus against the Seleucid Empire not only strengthen Jewish identity, but also serve as powerful examples of God acts through individuals to preserve his covenant. For Ethiopia, which has faced external threats from colonizers and foreign powers throughout its history, the Maccabees represent the struggle to preserve faith and spiritual sovereignty. This role of resistance became particularly significant during the colonial era. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European powers, particularly Italy, sought to impose their dominion over Ethiopia. However, Ethiopia was not just a nation with a long history of political independence. It was also a spiritual stronghold that maintained its Christian identity, independent of Western influences. The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, with its so-called banned texts, symbolized this independence. It represented a direct connection to the roots of Christianity, untainted by colonialism or Western theological decisions. European invaders did not merely see the Ethiopian Bible as a theological curiosity, but also as a threat. The content of these texts reinforced Ethiopia's spiritual identity and challenged the dominant narrative of Western Christianity. Marginalizing the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible and imposing a Western version of Christianity was part of a broader effort to subjugate Ethiopia, both culturally and spiritually. But Ethiopia resisted. Its church continued to safeguard these sacred texts, recognizing their value as a testament to divine revelation and as an anchor of national identity. This preservation was not merely an act of religious fidelity. It was a declaration of independence, a reminder that Ethiopian faith would not be shaped or controlled by external forces. The impact of these texts extends far beyond Ethiopia. They challenge us to reconsider what was lost during the formation of the Western canon. What mysteries, stories, and truths remain hidden in the books that were cast aside? What if these truths still have something important to say about our faith today? As we reflect on these texts, we begin to understand that the story of Christianity might be far larger and more intricate than we ever imagined. As we reach the end of this journey, we are confronted with a profound question. What else lies hidden in the pages of history that we have yet to fully comprehend? The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, with its banned and preserved texts, opens a window into a vaster spiritual world filled with stories, mysteries, and truths that challenge our modern understanding of Christian faith. These texts are not merely relics of the past. They serve as reminders that the history of divine revelation is multifaceted and often shaped by human choices. When books like Enoch, Jubilees, and the Maccabees were excluded from the Western canon, they didn't lose their spiritual and theological depth. They continue to testify to the eternal struggle between good and evil, the roles of angels and celestial forces, and the promise of divine redemption for all humanity. But what does this mean for us today? Have we overlooked important truths in an attempt to simplify Christianity? Could we be missing a fuller understanding of spiritual warfare, the nature of sin, and salvation by neglecting texts like these? And what about the parallels between the past and the present? We live in an increasingly tumultuous world, marked by conflicts, divisions, and uncertainties. Perhaps these ancient texts hold answers to questions that still challenge us today. The preservation of these books by Ethiopia teaches us that, even in the face of opposition, it is possible to protect and honor what is sacred. They remind us that faith does not need to conform to dominant structures to remain true. In fact, some of the most profound truths are found in the texts that were marginalized and forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered. Now the question is, how will you respond to this? Are you willing to delve deeper into your own faith, seeking what may have been overlooked or ignored? Are you prepared to consider that the mysteries of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible might not only illuminate the past, but also offer guidance for the present and the future? If this exploration resonated with you, I encourage you to join the conversation. Like this video because every interaction helps spread this message to more people. Share your thoughts in the comments. What book mentioned here captured your attention the most? Is there something specific you'd like to explore further? Your voice is vital in building a community that seeks to uncover the deeper dimensions of faith. And of course, subscribe to the channel to continue discovering the hidden mysteries and lesser-known stories that shape our spiritual understanding. By doing so, you not only support this work, but also become part of a movement that values knowledge, faith, and truth. Together, let's continue this journey of discovery and growth. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter of this incredible exploration of history and divine purpose. May your quest for answers be illuminated, and may your journey of faith always be strengthened. See you soon.